That question echoes through eternity. It began as a whisper, carried across the cold void of the galaxy, long before the first world burned and before brother turned against brother. It began with doubt, and doubt, in the Imperium of Man, is the first seed of damnation. In the age before the heresy, humanity stood at the very edge of a golden dawn. The Emperor of Mankind, a being of unimaginable power and vision, had united the scattered remnants of our species under one banner, a single, unstoppable force meant to bring reason, order, and enlightenment to the stars. Billions worshipped his dream of unity. His armies, the Legiones Astartes, were demigods of war, forged from his own genetic essence. Among them, none were greater than the Primarchs, 20 sons, each embodying a part of his divine will. And among those sons, one shone brightest, Horus Heresy, the favored child. To the soldiers who marched in his name, Horus was more than a commander. He was the embodiment of courage, loyalty, and charisma. When he spoke, entire worlds listened. When he led, the stars themselves seemed to bend in his favor. The Emperor trusted him above all others, granting him the title of War Master, Supreme Leader of the Great Crusade. It was a title that came with honor, and an unbearable weight. Because in the shadow of greatness, even light can rot. Horus did not fall in a single moment. It was not a strike of lightning, but a slow infection. At first, it was pride. The belief that he, the greatest of all sons, understood the Imperium better than even his father. Then came doubt, whispered by those who hid in the warp's unseen corners. The Chaos Gods, ancient entities that fed on human emotion, had long waited for such a man. They watched as Horus's faith cracked under the strain of his perfection, until one day, the whisper became a voice, and the voice became truth. They told him the Emperor was not a god, but a tyrant. They told him that the dream of the Imperium was a lie. That humanity's destiny was not to be shackled to one man's vision, but to embrace the freedom of chaos, the raw truth of the warp. And in that lie, Horus found something dangerous: belief. The first blood of the heresy was not spilled by blade or bolter, but by betrayal. As Horus stood upon the desolate world of Davin, wounded and delirious, the serpent of chaos coiled around his heart. It promised him that the Emperor had abandoned him, that he was meant to lead humanity into a new age of power. In his weakness, he listened. In his pride, he agreed. And in that single choice, the galaxy began to unravel. Worlds that once shouted the Emperor's name began to whisper Horus's instead. Legions, once brothers, became enemies. The warp stirred, and reality trembled as the light of the Imperium began to fade. For the first time in 1,000 years, mankind's greatest dream began to die. And the man who had once been its brightest hope, had become its executioner. That's the question that haunted Horus in the days after Davin. He had seen visions, terrible, vivid glimpses of a future where the Emperor ruled as a god, enthroned upon a machine of death, worshipped by slaves, and fed by the souls of humanity. The vision tore at him, twisted his mind, and reshaped his devotion into something darker. If that future was real, then his father wasn't a savior. He was a jailer. And that's how the serpent tightened its grip. The whispers of chaos did not come in roaring voices or demonic visions, they came through trust. They came through friends. Through men who had fought beside him for centuries. The War Master's most loyal captains, Erebus, Lorgar, and others who had already tasted the forbidden truths of the warp, fed his doubts one drop at a time. They painted the Emperor as a liar, claiming that he had hidden his own ascension to godhood while forbidding others from understanding the power of faith. It wasn't war that broke the Imperium first, it was faith. Horus, the brightest son of humanity, began to believe that he was liberating mankind from deception. The irony: his rebellion was built entirely on a greater one. The Chaos Gods had found their perfect weapon, a man too noble to realize that his righteousness had become their tool. As his corruption deepened, so too did his influence. Legion by legion, system by system, the seed of rebellion spread. The sons of Horus became the first to kneel, their loyalty shifting from the emperor to the warmaster. Others followed, some seduced by promises of glory, others convinced that the emperor had truly abandoned them. Soon, the galaxy that once marched under one banner began to fracture like glass. And in those cracks, chaos seeped in. But not all were blind to the storm that was coming. Among the loyal sons, Primarchs like Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, and loyal Guilliman, unease began to rise. They saw the change in Horus's tone, the venom hidden beneath his once noble words. Yet, even they couldn't imagine how deep the rot had gone. For Horus was still their brother, their beloved leader, the warmaster they had bled for. That's what made his betrayal so devastating. It wasn't a sudden strike, but a slow unraveling of everything they believed in. Imagine it, entire fleets of Astartes, men born to serve the emperor, now turning their weapons upon their brothers. The same war cries that once united humanity now echoed through burning skies as accusations. For Horus, clashed against, for the emperor. In a storm of hatred and disbelief. What began as a whisper on Davin would soon ignite the most destructive civil war in human history, the Horus Heresy. And if you think you've heard the worst of it, stay till the end of this story, because what comes next will show you the true cost of betrayal, the horrors that made even the gods tremble, and the tragic end of a father's dream turned to ash. That question tore through the hearts of the Space Marines as the heresy ignited. One by one, the stars of the Imperium began to dim, whole systems drowned in fire and madness. The galaxy, once united by the Emperor's dream, fractured into 1,000 wars of loyalty and vengeance. It began with Istvan, a name that would be burned into history as the first true grave of brotherhood. Horus struck swiftly, with the precision of a god of war. He lured the loyalist legions to the planet of Istvan III under the guise of reclaiming a rebellious system. But when the loyal Astartes landed upon its surface, believing themselves on a mission of unity, the skies opened, and their own brothers bombarded them from orbit. The virus bombs fell first, washing over cities and trenches in green death. The air turned to poison. Flesh melted from bone. Warriors who had once fought side by side now choked on the same air, screaming their last oaths of loyalty to an emperor who could no longer hear them. And as the death clouds cleared, Horus sent in his armies to finish what the virus had begun. The ground ran red with betrayal. The loyalists who survived, those too stubborn or too pure to die easily, fought on. They carved messages of defiance into their armor, fought until their weapons broke, until even their power armor became their tombs. These were not men anymore, they were martyrs of a dream betrayed. And in orbit, Horus watched it all unfold. They said his face was calm, cold, but in the depths of his mind, something darker stirred, acceptance. The line had been crossed. There was no turning back now. The son had become the destroyer, and the father's light had become his enemy. When word reached Terra, the emperor's palace fell silent. None dared to speak. None could comprehend what had happened. His favorite son had not only rebelled, he had slaughtered his faithful. It was no longer a matter of politics or pride. It was war. Across the stars, the other Primarchs were forced to choose. Some hesitated, torn between love and loyalty. Others, like Lorgar, Angron, and Fulgrim, had already fallen so far into the whispers of the warp that salvation was impossible. But there were still those who stood defiant, Rogel Dorn, ever the fortress incarnate. Sanguinius, whose purity shone even in the darkness. Vulcan, Guilliman, Corax, all rallied to their father's call. But even as they prepared for war, none understood what they were truly facing. This wasn't a rebellion of men, it was the corruption of gods. Chaos had tasted victory, and it wanted more. The warp surged across the galaxy like a tide of nightmares. Demons clawed at the veil of reality, hungry to spill into the mortal realm. Entire worlds vanished, torn apart by madness. And in that madness, Horus found purpose. To his followers, he was no longer a traitor, he was a liberator. He promised freedom, power, and immortality. The corrupted legions, once angels of the Emperor's light, became monsters of the warp. The World Eaters descended into slaughter without reason. The Emperor's children pursued perfection until their very souls fractured. In the Death Guard, they embraced decay itself, their bodies rotting even as they fought, their armor oozing with pestilence and faith in Nurgle's gift of eternity. The galaxy burned, but through that endless fire, one truth became clear: this was no longer just a war for control, it was a war for the soul of mankind. As the heresy spread, there was no peace, no sanctuary. Loyalists fought on worlds that no longer existed on any map. Titans clashed like ancient gods, and every victory tasted like ash. The Emperor's dream of unity had died on Istvan, and in its place rose something far darker, a truth written in blood. Even gods can bleed. Terra, the cradle of humanity, the seat of the Emperor himself, had always been the heart of the Imperium. A world so sacred that even its air carried the weight of history. But now, the sky above it burned red with betrayal. The Warmaster had come home. For 7 long years, the Horus Heresy had torn the galaxy apart. Brother had slaughtered brother. Legions that once fought together now hunted each other through the void. But every battle, every world consumed by fire, was leading to this, the final confrontation. When Horus's fleet emerged from the warp, the heavens themselves seemed to tremble. Thousands of ships, twisted by the touch of chaos, surrounded Terra like vultures circling a dying god. The Loyalists, battered and broken, rallied behind Rogel Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, tasked with defending the palace and the Emperor's dream. The siege began with silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the breath before the end of all things. Then, the bombardment started. The traitor fleet unleashed its fury. Entire continents cracked beneath the firestorm. Oceans boiled. The walls of the imperial palace, once thought unbreakable, shuddered under the relentless assault. But the defenders held. Every man, every woman, every space marine, knew this was no ordinary war, it was the last stand of humanity. Inside the palace, the Emperor worked tirelessly on his secret project, the Golden Throne, a device meant to preserve the future of mankind. But even a god cannot save a galaxy when the heavens themselves have turned against him. The blood of billions stained the soil of Terra. Titans strode through the ruins, their thunderous steps shaking mountains. The skies were filled with demons, summoned by the traitor legions. The world became a nightmare, half reality, half madness. And at the center of it all, Horus waited. He could have stormed the palace immediately. He could have crushed the Loyalists in a single strike. But he didn't. He wanted his father to see what he had done, to feel the pain of watching his creation burn. The Warmaster wanted victory not through speed, but through despair. Within the walls, Sanguinius, the angel of Baal, led the defense with divine grace. His wings, once symbols of purity, now carried the weight of death. He fought like a being born of both faith and sorrow, knowing deep inside that this was his final battle. Every Primarch who remained loyal gave everything they had, every breath, every drop of blood, to hold the line. And yet, the line was breaking. The traitor legions were endless. The sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, all crashed against Terra like a tidal wave of nightmares. The palace gates fell one by one, torn apart by the fury of chaos. For every loyal space marine who died, 10 more traitors rose in their place. The defenders fought in silence, their voices hoarse from prayer and battle cries that had long lost meaning. Then, amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Horus lowered the shields around his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. It was an invitation, a challenge. The Emperor knew what it meant. Horus wanted the end to come by his hand. So, the Emperor gathered his mightiest warriors, Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, and the remnants of his custodes, and teleported aboard the Warmaster's ship. What they found there was beyond comprehension. The Vengeful Spirit was no longer a vessel of steel and fire, it was a fortress of corruption, twisted by the warp into a living nightmare. The corridors pulsed like veins. The air reeked of death and deceit. Within that floating tomb of madness, father and sons would meet one final time. And in the heart of it all, the Warmaster waited. The galaxy had fallen into ruin. The Emperor's dream lay shattered. And now, everything, the light, the darkness, the future of mankind, would be decided in one final confrontation between a god and his most beloved son. The vengeful spirit hung over Terra like an omen, its shadow draped across the burning world below. Within that monstrous ship, time and reality fractured. Every corridor pulsed with the heartbeat of chaos. Every whisper carried the laughter of demons. The air itself screamed. It was there, in that abyss of corruption, that the Emperor and his loyal sons made their final ascent. But fate is cruel. The teleportation scattered them. Rogel Dorn and the Custodes were torn away by the warp, flung into other sections of the ship. Only two remained together, the Emperor, radiant yet weary, and Sanguinius, his angelic son, whose wings were darkened with blood and exhaustion. The corridors twisted as they advanced. The ship was alive, walls pulsing like veins, metal groaning as though it resented their steps. Sanguinius could feel it, the hatred, the resentment, the sorrow that filled every inch of the Warmaster's domain. And then, in the heart of that madness, he found Horus. He stood upon a bridge of black iron, gazing down at the burning world. His armor shimmered with unholy light, inscribed with runes of the dark gods. Where once there had been warmth in his eyes, now there was only cold certainty, a pride that no longer belonged to humanity. "Horus," Sanguinius whispered, his voice heavy with grief. "You've damned us all." The Warmaster turned, his expression unreadable. "No, brother. I've freed us. Father was never going to lead us to glory, only chains. I broke them." Sanguinius knew words would not save him. He saw the truth. Horus was already lost, his soul drowned in the abyss. The two Primarchs clashed in a storm of fury, angel against demon, light against corruption. The ship trembled under the weight of their blows. But even an angel's courage has its limits. Horus struck him down. His hand, guided by the will of chaos, shattered Sanguinius's chest. The angel of Baal fell, broken and silent, his blood spilling across the corrupted steel. And as his life faded, his final thought was not of himself, but of the father he had loved. When the Emperor found them, time seemed to stop. His gaze fell upon his fallen son, and something ancient and human flickered within him, grief. Pure, unbearable grief. Horus stood over Sanguinius's corpse, his armor glowing with power stolen from the gods themselves. "You made me this way," he said, voice trembling with both rage and triumph. "You taught me to conquer, to command, to bring order. And now you deny me my destiny." The Emperor said nothing. He simply looked at his son, the son who had once been the brightest star of his creation, and saw what he had become. The battle that followed cannot be truly described. Mortal minds were not meant to comprehend the clash of gods. Power beyond reason tore through the ship, ripping reality apart. Every strike carried the weight of galaxies, every parry shattered the veil between life and death. Horus fought with the strength of all the dark gods combined. He was unstoppable, a storm of hatred and pride. The Emperor, wounded by centuries of war and betrayal, faltered under the onslaught. The Warmaster struck him down, breaking his armor, searing his flesh. The greatest being humanity had ever known lay dying at the hands of his own creation. But in that moment of victory, Horus made a fatal mistake. He hesitated. For the briefest instant, he saw what he had done. He saw the body of his brother at his feet, the ruin of his father before him, and the truth pierced the madness. For a single heartbeat, Horus Lupercal, the son, the Warmaster, the beloved, returned. And the Emperor struck. In that instant of clarity, he unleashed his full power, not as a ruler, not as a god, but as a father mourning what he had lost. The light that followed burned through the ship, through the warp itself, erasing the corruption that had consumed his son. Horus screamed, his soul torn apart, the dark gods abandoning him in horror. When it was over, there was silence. The Emperor collapsed beside the body of his fallen child. The vengeful spirit shuddered, the warp screaming as the Warmaster's death rippled across reality. The war was over, but victory had no meaning. The father had slain the son. The son had slain the dream. The battle was over. The vengeful spirit lay in ruin, torn apart by the final duel between father and son. The warp shrieked in agony, retreating from the shattered vessel. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating, like the pause before a storm that would never truly end. The Emperor of Mankind survived, but at an unimaginable cost. His body was shattered beyond repair, and his strength, once limitless, had been spent entirely in the destruction of Horus. To preserve what remained of his life and protect humanity, he was entombed upon the Golden Throne, a device of both miraculous power and terrible limitation. It sustained his existence, but it imprisoned him in a state between life and death. The galaxy had a god, yes, but it was a god who could no longer walk among his children, who could only watch through eyes that no longer saw. Horus, the favored son, was gone, burned to ash by the very light he had once sought to extinguish. But his legacy remained, a stain upon the galaxy that would never fade. The traitor legions, leaderless and broken, retreated into the Eye of Terror, a realm of perpetual darkness and corruption. The Imperium was fractured, bleeding, and forever changed. The dream of unity, the vision of an enlightened human empire, had died that day on Terra. And yet, humanity endured. Rogel Dorn and the surviving loyal Primarchs rebuilt what they could. Worlds were retaken, fleets reassembled, and governments restored, but the cost was incalculable. Entire civilizations had been annihilated. The death toll of the Horus Heresy numbered in the billions, and the survivors carried the scars of betrayal so deep that even time could not heal them. The Emperor's sons, the Primarchs, were forever divided. Some had fallen to chaos, wandering the dark corners of the galaxy as corrupted shadows of their former selves. Others remained loyal, yet haunted by grief, guilt, and the unbearable weight of loss. Every legion was marked, every warrior changed, every star system touched by fire. The Imperium itself became a pale reflection of the dream it had once been. A sprawling bureaucracy, a galaxy-spanning empire, dominated by fear and faith rather than hope and enlightenment. Humanity survived, but at the cost of freedom, at the cost of knowledge, at the cost of truth. The Emperor was worshipped as a god, not for the enlightenment he had intended to bring, but because mortals had no other choice. In the shadow of Horus, the son who fell, the brother who betrayed, remained. The Eye of Terror still churned with the remnants of his corruption, a constant reminder that even the brightest light can be extinguished, and even the noblest of intentions can be twisted into unimaginable darkness. The Horus Heresy left scars that no millennium could heal. Civilizations burned, hope was shattered, and humanity learned a brutal truth, that even gods are fallible, that love can become betrayal, and that in the endless night of the galaxy, survival itself is a victory tinged with sorrow. The galaxy endured, but it would never be the same. The Emperor remained upon his throne, watching, guiding, but unable to intervene. The dream had died, but from its ashes arose a grim reality. The Imperium would endure, not because of unity, not because of reason, but because survival is the only law the galaxy truly obeys. In the story of Horus, the favored son, the Warmaster, the betrayer, remains a warning to all who would believe in perfection, a tale of power, pride, and the unbreakable cost of betrayal. The Horus Heresy did not end with the death of Horus. It ended, yes, in victory for the Emperor, but victory of such magnitude came at a price that no human mind could fully comprehend. The Imperium survived, but it did not thrive. It became a machine of survival, fueled by fear, faith, and the echoes of a betrayal so vast that it reshaped history itself. The Primarchs, the sons of the Emperor, were scattered across the stars. Some lay dead, their legacies immortalized only in tragedy. Sanguinius, the angel who had faced the Warmaster with unyielding courage, had fallen. Ferrus Manus, Rogel Dorn, Vulcan, and the others bore the weight of grief and the haunting knowledge that they could not save all their brothers. Each loyalist was a reminder that even in triumph, the shadow of betrayal remained. The traitor legions, however, did not vanish. They fled to the Eye of Terror, a realm where the warp and reality intertwined, and there they waited, hatching schemes, growing in strength, twisting themselves further in the image of chaos. Horus's dream, twisted though it was, had created a galaxy forever haunted by ambition, power, and corruption. The Emperor had won the battle, but the war never truly ended. The Imperium became a fortress built upon the bones of 1,000 worlds. Humanity endured, yes, but only because it had no other choice. The Golden Throne kept the Emperor alive, a beacon of hope and fear intertwined. Yet every prayer to his name reminded mortals that their salvation came at the cost of freedom, knowledge, and understanding. They worshipped a God who could not move, who could not act, and whose suffering was eternal. And across the galaxy, the shadow of Horus lingered. The memory of his betrayal shaped laws, doctrines, in the hearts of every human who dared to dream. Entire generations grew up in the knowledge that loyalty could be shattered in an instant, that even the brightest sun could become the greatest enemy. The heresy became legend, yes, but legends in the Imperium were never tales of triumph. They were warnings, reminders, and instruments of fear. The galaxy's history would always carry the imprint of that dark age. Worlds would rise and fall. Legions would battle in the name of faith, power, and vengeance. And through it all, the story of Horus would endure, the favored son who betrayed his father, the warmaster who turned light into shadow, the architect of humanity's greatest tragedy. Every death, every act of devotion, every desperate victory in the millennia to come would be touched by the heresy. Every human empire, every battle, every whisper of rebellion would echo with the memory of betrayal so deep that it could never be erased. The grim reality of the Horus Heresy is this: even when the light survives, the darkness never truly dies. It waits in the corners of ambition, pride, and faith. It waits in the hearts of men, in the minds of warriors, in the decisions of those who think themselves gods. And it will rise again, because the galaxy never forgets, and it never forgives. The Emperor remains on his golden throne, watching silently. Horus lies in the ashes of history, a warning etched into eternity. And humanity, trapped between light and shadow, marches forward, forever changed, forever wary, and forever reminded that even the greatest dream can become a nightmare. The heresy left scars that would never heal. Billions had died. Primarchs were slain or scattered. Entire civilizations were wiped from existence, their names reduced to whispers in the void. And yet, the Imperium endured, not through glory, not through justice, but because survival is the only constant in a galaxy defined by war. The Emperor, enthroned upon the Golden Throne, became both a god and a prisoner. He could no longer walk among his children, could no longer guide humanity with the direct hand of a father. His vision of unity was gone, replaced by an empire of bureaucracy, dogma, and fear. The dream had died, but humanity remained. Horus Lupercal's name became legend, a cautionary tale whispered across the stars. The Warmaster, once the brightest hope of mankind, had fallen, and in his fall, he reshaped the galaxy. Chaos had gained a foothold it would never relinquish, and the traitor legions lurked in the Eye of Terror, waiting for the opportunity to strike again. The shadow of the heresy stretched across millennia, touching every battle, every conflict, every desperate struggle of humanity. And still, the loyalists pressed on. The Primarchs who survived carried the weight of grief, guilt, and the unshakable memory of betrayal. Every victory came at a cost, every triumph was tinged with sorrow. The Imperium of Man became a fortress, a machine fueled by devotion and fear, a testament to the endurance of humanity even when hope seemed lost. The story of the Horus Heresy is not just a tale of war. It is a story of ambition, pride, love, and betrayal. It is a reminder that even the greatest among us can fall, and that even the most divine intentions can be corrupted. The galaxy learned a lesson written in blood and fire, that light can be extinguished by those we trust most, and that survival often demands sacrifice that no one should ever have to bear. The stars themselves remember the screams of worlds lost, the echoes of Primarchs slain, and the anguish of a god who could no longer act. The memory of Horus lingers, the shadow of the heresy stretches on, and the grim reality remains: the galaxy is forever changed. Even now, in the silent void between stars, the consequences of that terrible betrayal continue to shape the destiny of mankind. Loyalty, faith, and power are forever entwined with the horror of what was lost, and the knowledge that even gods are not immune to the corruption of ambition. The Imperium marches on, not as a beacon of hope, but as a testament to endurance, a monument to suffering, and a reminder that the darkest shadows often come from within. The Horus Heresy left more than death and destruction, it left a truth so cruel that humanity would carry it forever. Power without wisdom corrupts, love without vigilance can destroy. Even the brightest among us can become the architects of their own ruin. The Imperium survived, yes, but at the cost of freedom, knowledge, and hope. Its citizens worship the Emperor not because they understand him, but because they must. They pray for protection in a universe that offers none. They follow rules written in blood and enforced by fear, because the galaxy taught them that survival demands obedience. And somewhere, deep within the Eye of Terror, the traitor legions wait, patient and eternal, ready to strike again when weakness shows. The story of Horus is no longer just history, it is law. It is warning. Every child who grows up in the Imperium learns of his rise and fall. Every warrior who dons the armor of a space marine carries his shadow in their mind, a reminder that the line between loyalty and treachery is thinner than a blade. Every victory, every triumph, is haunted by the memory of what happens when ambition and pride go unchecked. Even the Emperor himself, the architect of humanity's golden dream, sits trapped upon his golden throne, a god in form, but prisoner in flesh. He rules not through power, but through endurance, ensuring that mankind survives while remembering the cost of betrayal. His vision of unity has become a grim echo, a reminder that even the greatest dreams are fragile in the face of ambition, corruption, and chaos. And so, the galaxy moves forward. Empires rise and fall, legions clash across the stars. Heroes are forged, and villains are made. And through it all, the shadow of Horus lingers, a constant reminder of what the universe can demand from those who reach too far, who trust too deeply, or who dare to defy destiny itself. The Horus Heresy was not simply a war. It was a lesson that resonates across the stars, that light can be extinguished, that betrayal can come from the heart, and that the darkest shadows often emerge not from enemies without, but from the ones we call our own. And as humanity continues its endless struggle among the stars, one truth remains eternal: the galaxy will never forget Horus. It will never forget the heresy. And it will never escape the grim reality that even in survival, shadows endure. The Horus Heresy is not simply a chapter in history, it is the echo of every choice made, every oath broken, every dream shattered in the vast emptiness of the galaxy. Billions of lives lost. Worlds consumed by fire. Legions turned against each other in the name of gods, both mortal and immortal. The price of betrayal was written in blood, and its ink never fades. The Emperor, trapped upon the golden throne, endures still. His power sustains humanity, yet it comes at a price: a throne of suffering, a body broken beyond repair, and a watchful eye over a galaxy that no longer knows hope but only duty. His dream of a united, enlightened humanity is gone, replaced by a reality forged in fear, faith, and survival. Horus Lupercal, the War Master, is dead, but his shadow lingers. The traitor legions remain in the Eye of Terror, patient, plotting, and waiting for the opportunity to rise again. The galaxy has learned a lesson etched in horror: even the brightest can fall, and even the noblest intentions can be twisted into catastrophe. The Imperium survives, not because it inspires greatness, but because it enforces obedience. The stories of loyalty and heroism are overshadowed by the ever-present memory of betrayal. Every soldier, every citizen, every child born under the Emperor's gaze carries within them the knowledge that the galaxy is fragile, and trust is a dangerous thing. And yet, humanity endures. Through endless war, through chaos and corruption, the Imperium continues to exist. It is a testament not to glory, but to resilience. The galaxy may be scarred, its heroes fallen, and its gods trapped, but it continues to breathe. Life persists, even in the shadow of betrayal. The final truth of the Horus Heresy is stark and eternal. Perfection is a lie, power can corrupt, and survival is often the only victory worth claiming. Light and shadow, loyalty and betrayal, hope and despair, they are forever intertwined in the fate of humanity. The galaxy will remember, and it will never be the same. The heresy is over, yet its lessons remain. The echoes of Horus's ambition, the sacrifices of the loyalists, the silent suffering of the Emperor, all endure as reminders that even in victory, there is grief, and even in survival, there is darkness. The galaxy marches on, haunted and vigilant, shaped forever by the horrors of what transpired. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all, that the shadows of the past are never truly gone, and the grim reality of betrayal lingers forever.